Here we have 5 items that we're going to place from left to right. So let me write them here. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and we'll underline them. And what do the rules say? So the first thing is that it's a 5-digit product code. So I'm going to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll call them slots. Slots in the code, places in the code. And then we'll write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. And what do the rules say? Well, we're told each digit occurs once in any code. So 5 items, 5 slots, everybody appears once and only once. Okay, simple enough. Next rule, second digit, a value twice that of the first digit. So what exactly does that mean? Step 1 on any logic game is to write out the rules. So how about I do this? How about second equals 2 times the first? How about that? In logic games, you don't often use mathematical symbols to help express a rule, but it comes up once in a while. So that's that rule. How about the last rule? The value of the third digit less than the value of the fifth. So if I were to write the third, I could write it less than fifth. I could write it out that way. Once you write a rule, you always want to ask, can I represent it in the diagram as well? And yeah, we could do that here. Let's write an arc from the third slot to the fifth slot. And whichever one is in the fifth slot is bigger than the number in the third slot. The hardest part of this logic game, quite honestly, is distinguishing at all times between which slot you're in, 1 through 5, and which digit you're using, 0 through 4. It's easy to mistake the two. So that's always step 1. Write out your rules in a nice, concise way. Step 2, always ask, can I combine the rules in some way? Always the most important step in analyzing a logic game. Now here, can I combine the rules? Not really. We can't really combine them here, but that's fine. It's always the first question and the most important question to ask yourself, can I combine them somehow? Okay, step 3, build your diagram and make deductions, draw conclusions. So building the diagram, what do we want to do here? One thing to always ask yourself is, can I create 2, sometimes even 3 or 4, but usually 2 broad scenarios, 2 different states of the world? What does that mean? Well, I'm looking at the first rule here. Suppose the first digit were 1. According to that rule, the second digit would be double that. The second digit would be 2. So the first 2 digits could be 1 and 2. How about suppose the first digit were 2, the second digit would be 2 times 2. It would be 4, twice the value of the first digit. So that's fine. Now suppose the first digit were 3. Well, technically, the second digit would have to be a 6, and there is no 6. We can't do that. So this game is a great candidate for creating 2 broad scenarios, 2 states of the world. So let's do that right now. First, we drew exactly the same diagram. Scenario 1, you begin with a 1 and a 2. Scenario 2, 2, 4. And let's even label these. Scenario 1, scenario 2. So we've got our 1, 2 scenario and our 2, 4 scenario. This is going to make life a lot easier. This is going to save you a lot of time. People ask, how do I save time on logic games? The answer is a little bit counterintuitive. The way to save time is to invest just a little bit of time at the beginning, writing out your rules, combining the rules, building your diagram, drawing conclusions before you even look at the questions. So we're building the diagram. Let's keep going. In scenario 1, who's left? I've got a 0, I've got a 3, I've got a 4. In scenario 2, I've got a 0, I've got a 1, I've got a 3. Okay, in a sequencing game, a game in which you're ordering things from left to right, a great question to ask yourself is, who could be first and who could be last? Well, let's look at scenario 1. If I take a look at this last rule over here, we said that whichever item is in the last slot has to have a greater value, has to be a bigger number than the item in the third slot. So what does that mean? Could this be a 0? No, it couldn't. I'm going to write 1/4. And how about the second scenario? Well, here again, the last item, it could not be a 0, but it could be a 1 and it could be a 3. So that's your master sketch. And as I said, doing this, putting together a great diagram will save you a lot of time. In the first game on the LSAT, you want to spend as much as 2 minutes putting together your master sketch. After that, 2 to 3 minutes. But first game, 2 minutes, and then it's time to move on to the questions. So let's write a nice, thick underline. You don't want to touch the master sketch. You don't want to tamper with the master sketch if you can possibly avoid it. Now we'll jump to the questions. Question 1. So for this particular question, the last digit is a 1. Well, let's see. Do we know which scenario we're in? Yeah, we'd have to be in scenario 2. We're definitely not in scenario 1. We'd have to be in scenario 2. So let's write our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots underneath the master sketch. Let's bring down the 2, 4 from the master sketch. We'll write a 1 in the 5th slot. When you place an item, look at the rules on the item and look at the rules on the slot that the item is in, if there are rules on that slot. No rules on the digit 1, but there is, of course, a rule on the 5th slot. Whichever is in the 5th slot we know is bigger than whichever is in the 3rd slot. So we're going to have a 0 here, which means we're going to have what? We're going to have a 3 here. So that's the arrangement. That's the code. We'll take a quick look at the answer choices. Hey, pretty simple. It's answer A. One thing to point out here is that oftentimes when you find out that you're limited to only one of the scenarios, that alone tells you everything you need to know to answer the question. So as soon as we realized we had to be in scenario 2, it would have then been a good idea to go through the 5 answer choices and see if the correct one jumps out, and of course it does. For educational purposes, I wanted to write out all 5 slots and talk about how to fill out the slots, but something you want to think about. Okay, how about question 2? You'll see that now that we've drawn out our diagram, this one is going to be really easy. Just pause for a second, take a look at the answer choices. Answer C, the digit 2 appears sometime before the digit 3, somewhere to the left of the digit 3. Well, of course, in scenario 1, 2 is right here, 3 is somewhere on the right. That's scenario 1. And then scenario 2, similar story. Here's the digit 2 and everything else is over here on the right. So answer C. Really, really helpful to create 2 broad scenarios if you can. How about the next question? 3rd digit of the code is not 0. It is not 0. Okay, let's write out our 5 slots. And as far as we know so far, we could be in either scenario. So we'll write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the left and on the right. Bring down the 1, 2 from the first diagram. Bring down the 2, 4 from the second diagram. The 3rd digit is not 0. Okay, they talk about the 3rd digit. So let's see, are there any rules on the 3rd digit? Yes, as we know very well by now, whichever item is 3rd is a smaller number than whoever is 5th. So in scenario 1, if the 3rd item, if it's not 0, then it has to be what? It has to be 3. I place an item in slot 3. I look at the rules on slot 3. We know that what? The last digit has to be a bigger number, has to be 4, which means 0 is going to be in the 4th slot. So that's scenario 1. How about scenario 2? 3rd slot is not 0. So who could it be? Would have to be 1, which means who is last? 3 is last. And here again, 0 is in the 4th slot. So you take a quick look at the answer choices. Answer C. It can take a little while to get used to it, but I promise you really can get used to it. You really can get very comfortable with logic games if you approach them in the right way. Let's look at question 4. And by the way, as you write these out, it's a good idea to put the question number next to what you wrote. So this was what? This was question 3. And up here, this was question 1. But question 4, take a look at this. You don't need to write out any blank spots. Just look at the diagram. Take each answer choice one at a time. Look at scenario 1, see if it could work. Then look at scenario 2, see if it could work. The correct answer is not acceptable in either scenario. Pause for a moment and take a look. The answer here, E as in echo. And let me switch colors. In scenario 1, could we have 3 and 4? We couldn't. What's the problem? Because that means the 5th number would have to be 1, that the 5th number has to be a bigger number than the 3rd number. So not possible in scenario 1. How about scenario 2? 3, 4. Well, we already know that's a big problem because 4 has already been placed. So answer E. Question 5 is probably the hardest question on here. Which of the following must be true about any code, meaning any code in scenario 1 or in scenario 2? So pause and take a look at the choices if you'd like to. An answer that has to be true in scenario 1 and in scenario 2. Answer here, E is in echo. At most, 2 digits between the digit 2 and the digit 4. So what does that mean? At most 2, that means there cannot be 3 or more. Well, let's look at scenario 1. How many spaces could you have between the digit 2 and the digit 4? The maximum would be 1, 2 spaces. That's as far as you can possibly go. The maximum is 2. And then how about scenario 2? Well, here 2 and 4 are right next to each other. So 0 spaces in between them. Answer E. So I hope that all made sense. I hope you found this helpful. If it did, I encourage you to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media. And if you have any questions at all, just write them in the comments section. I will be sure to respond. Best of luck on the LSAT.